actual physical punch against my face.
So if you were hitting him, you were feeling some sort of sensation of being hit yourself?
Yeah. So if we
would it be in a specific place on your body?
As I'm looking at somebody face to face, the physical sensations that I feel in my body are mirrored. For example, if they were touching kind of the left side of their face and I'm looking at them head on, I feel as if there's a kind of a phantom finger stroking the right side of my face.
And so when you were at school, did it have an effect on you there?
Yeah, I went to a high school that was kind of rough. There was a lot of fights that would break out. Also, I was picked on a lot, being kind of rather nerdy and kind of weird. And I think a lot of it led to this significant feeling of alienation, isolation, but also this almost contradictory feeling of very deep empathy for the people around me.
So if your brother's punches counted for double, what happened if someone gave you a hug?
Yeah, absolutely. This mirror touch experience, it's the same for pleasure and pain in that it's whatever sensory information is entering into my brain is recreated by my brain as if it were physically happening to me. And I think one of the really lovely things about it is that if I were to see someone being hugged, I get to experience the sensation of hugging and being hugged. It's kind of almost like an openness or kind of a blurring of the boundary between myself and other people that I wouldn't give up for anything. I mean, there can be challenging times if I were to see someone upset or someone being physically hurt, but at the same time I get to have access to this really, really lovely experience of connecting with other people.
Was there a moment when it all started to make sense for you?
I was doing a medical trip out in India during my first year of medical school, and we were one night sitting around, myself and other medical students, talking about the health benefits of meditation, when a friend of mine said, "Oh, hey, did you know that there's this group of people who have an easier time getting into these deep meditative states, and they happen to also experience colors with sounds and colors with letters?" And I was struck by his comment, because I thought to myself, why would he mention that? That's so ordinary. Everybody has that. And it was only later that night. Sounds with colors. Why would you mention that? Everybody has that. And he looked at me and said, no, absolutely not.
That was when Joel first heard the term synesthesia. It's a neurological phenomenon where one sensory experience can prompt another. It's why some people see colours when they hear music or words. Famous synesthetes include Vincent van Gogh, Marilyn Monroe, and more recently, Lady Gaga and Pharrell Williams, who described his hit song Happy as yellow with a hint of mustard and sherbet orange. But Joel's condition is a bit different. He started various lab tests with specialist doctors. In 2009, a doctor in San Diego recognized his symptoms as mirror touch synesthesia.
One of the things they asked me was, do you happen to have mirror touch synesthesia or mirror touch? And I was puzzled by this because I assumed that Eric had this mirroring experience, and so I was kind of like, what do you mean by that? And a right finger along the right side of his cheek. And he says, what do you feel? And I said, I feel a finger on the left side. Also, sensory information is being predicted by my brain based off of the context, based off of my past experiences. And so as I see someone touching their right cheek, my brain will try to recreate that experience as much as possible using past experiences, as if I were literally being touched on my left cheek. It's almost as if my brain is working on the assumption that whoever I'm looking at is my reflection, or that I'm the reflection, that we're basically the same person. And I can tell that it's not real most of the time, but it feels very, very real. So as an example, as I began to see patients who had tic and Tourette's disorder, I had one patient who developed a pretty significant self-mutilating tics as a result of having a lot of stress in his life. And so what he does is he takes his right fist and pushes it up against the right corner of his mouth, and as he's doing that, he's also grinding his teeth and chewing on the inside of his mouth to the point where he actually ended up shredding his mouth. And as I'm seeing him do this, I'm also feeling this painful buzzing sensation shooting down the left side of my cheek and into my teeth. And it's almost like there's a stun gun kind of up against the side of my face being triggered with each of his ticks. And in moments like that, it's just very humbling because I consider myself someone who's relatively self-aware of kind of my bodily experiences. But for it to be so vivid, it just kind of almost reminds me that my brain's in charge, not the ghost inside.
And do you think your decision to train as a doctor was linked to the condition that you were experiencing?
I think so. One of the things that drew me to medicine was helping other people feel better, to feel good. And part of that was not just helping them feel good, but in helping them feel good, I also felt good. I almost felt kind of like a moth drawn to a flame, to this feeling of well-being and helping other people. And, I consider myself one of the lucky people with mirror touch, in that the majority of people that have mirror touch actually aren't able to make use of their mirror touch in their professional life. So for example, there's one woman who has mirror touch. She doesn't even own a dining room table because she can't bear the sight of seeing another person eat. And other people with mirror touch, they require long periods of isolation to offset some of these overwhelming perceptions, essentially. And I feel lucky that I'm able to kind of process that experience and actually make some use of it with patients. And where I find it to be most helpful for patients is actually in the office, in a non-emergent setting, where the patient may be going through a really tough time coping with their disease or their symptoms, and being in that space with them, they get to feel a little less lonely. And I think that's something, if you've ever been sick or been in the hospital, that means a lot in medicine.
Do you think you're able to diagnose people perhaps a bit faster than some of your colleagues because of the sensitivities you have?
If I were to kind of relate just anecdotally, I would say that there is a degree of speediness in diagnosis, and there may be a sensation that I pick up on that somebody might not have picked up on just because of the mirror touch. So as an example, I was consulted to see a young woman who had cerebral palsy in the hospital. Because of her cerebral palsy, she's not able to speak or really communicate, and she had come into the hospital with one medical issue, and one morning she woke up very angry, very agitated and combative, and the medical team didn't know what to do. And so they consulted me to come by, and as I walk into the room, I feel the feeling of this strands of hair on her forehead as if they're on my forehead. I feel the sensation of pushing up against a bed rail as she's pushing up against her bed rail. But there's also this subtle sensation of chest rising that's faster than my own breathing rate. So at that moment, I decide to trust my body, to trust this mirror touch, and I recommend a special test. And it turned out that she ended up having blood clots in her lungs. She wasn't fighting because she was agitated, she was literally fighting for air. And I don't think that's something I would have been able to catch as early if it hadn't been for the mirror touch.
I wonder if it could be dangerous for you. I wonder if, because you are so empathetic, that if you feel somebody else's pain, would there be a chance that it could damage you in some way?
I don't know that it would necessarily physically damage me, but if I'm called in for a cardiac arrest, I have to pay attention to the patient, but at the same time, if I'm finding the mirrored feelings overwhelming, I'd look at something that doesn't look like a person, like a sleeve or a collar, or I'll think about kind of the experience of my own body, like the feeling of my toes in my shoes, or my tongue in my mouth.
Is it something that you can focus? I'm just thinking about the position you find yourself often in, where you're in a crowded room or a crowded situation. Why is it that you're not picking up the distress of the people in the crowd who are looking at the patient? You're picking up the patient.
Yeah, depending on where my spotlight is where the feeling will be the most vivid. So as I'm in a crowded room of people, it's kind of like that air conditioner experience that I mentioned, where there's a constant kind of hum of activity, but my attention draws mostly to things that aren't there as predicted, or things that are anomalies essentially. And so that's where my attention will really focus in on. But as I'm walking around day to day, my attention will drift from one